Good morning, everybody. There's still some seats up front for anyone that's filing in. We want you to come sit close to us because you all feel very far away at the moment. Thanks for coming to our panel. It's called Makers to Mayors, and it's about building not only design capacity and development capacity, but also competency and the real understanding of what these skills mean, and that means different things across the levels. We need people who can really execute on these skills, but we also need leaders who understand and appreciate it and can, as we talked about yesterday on the main stage, make way for some of those executors to be on the ground. We're really lucky to have some speakers that are talking about this type of stuff on the main stage, but I wanted to make sure that we had a space to have a conversation about it as well. Yesterday we were, I think, so grateful to have Tom Loosemore from the UK's Government Digital Service talk about the work that they're doing there. I'm a total GDS fangirl, but it's not the only model. It takes a lot, right? That's what we call kind of the Design by Revolution. They made a big investment both in policy, infrastructure, people, funding to make that change. But we all can't do that, right? A lot of us wish we could. And there's groups that are starting to do it here in our country as well. But I think there's a lot of smaller impacts that we can have. And I'm really fortunate to have an amazing panel who's doing that work. For you, those of you that don't know me, my name is Ariel Kennan. You may know me as one of the Code for America Fellows last year on the Kansas City team. That year at Code for America really inspired me to continue in public service. And just earlier this month, I started with the New York City Mayor's Office of Operations, where I'm a product director on the Health and Human Services Connect team. I'm just getting started, so I can share a little bit about that work, but it's an exciting place to be. And I think moving forward as more Code for America alumni start to join public service, which is also very exciting. I also serve on the board of Beta NYC, which is the Code for America Brigade program in New York, as well as co-founded Designing Government, which is an online resource for civic design. I am so fortunate to have this panel of women who I just respect so much and admire, and very honored to call them my peers in public service now. I will let them all introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Krista Kanalakis. I work for the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation. So we're an office that champions new ideas, new tools, and new approaches in city government. And our mission is really to make City Hall more accessible, responsive, and transparent. And we do that by informing the mayor's innovative vision. We help city departments pilot new models, new approaches, and we really try to empower internal innovators and entrepreneurs to make their ideas happen and make their ideas reality. And then finally, we really work to improve the interface between citizens and government. My background, I'm an entrepreneur before coming to the city. I did my own civic startup. It was a crowdfunding platform in Chile that funded civic and community spaces. And before that, I worked in the private sector at a renewable energy startup. I have kind of a mixed background.
Good morning, my name is Ashley Hand, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Kansas City, Missouri. I am the first person in this role, so it was a real privilege and kind of serious responsibility to take on this role. I'm actually a licensed architect and probably was not what they anticipated when they started recruiting for this position. I think they were looking for someone who maybe had a more obvious pathway to government, and so I think that in and of itself showed that our mayor and city manager were willing to maybe take a little leap of faith in hiring me. And with that said, I report to both the city manager and mayor with the goal of having some opportunity to look at policy improvement as well as governance itself. And my two primary responsibilities are to look at internal process improvement and how we can do better in serving our customer, as well as what can we do to better enhance civic engagement, whether that is through technology or in person. How do we create a better dialogue and partnership with our community to be more effective in the work that we do? We have a very large landmass in Kansas City, Missouri, so our resources are stretched very thin across a large geography. So how can we build better capacity capacity through those partnerships with our community. So I've been with the city for about a year and a half. I think it's about 19 months technically right now. And it's been quite a ride, and I'm excited to be here today to share some of that.
Hi, thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Molly Ruskin. I am a new member of the U.S. Digital Service team in D.C. I'm a fresh start. This is my third week technically, so don't begrudge me if I bumble over explanations a little. I just came off a year as a Presidential Innovation Fellow with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And my role sort of in both these capacities is, for lack of a better definition, sort of all things design. I'm working with agencies to sort of help them understand how to build user-friendly services and human-centered processes baked into the way that they deliver their services, and also sort of helping to think about how we standardize experiences across the federal government and sort of help raise the bar for what citizens can expect when they approach the federal government for services.
Thank you all. We'll also have another panelist joining us. She just got stuck on Bart, so when somebody runs in, don't be surprised. We'll let her introduce herself when she gets here. You guys have all given a great intro to, I think, your roles in the offices that you work in. But do you want to talk more about how you are empowering that change and building capacity, and maybe with some specific examples? Go for it.
So I am unfunded with no staff, so I pretty much bootstrap what I do. We work in a couple different ways. I work very closely with both the city manager and the mayor's team, so they've been incredible resources to me. But how we actually get the work done is I often build innovation teams across multiple departments. So it's often people who've been appointed by their director, but also people who've kind of bubbled to the top, who've been showing interest and a willingness to come to the table and find different ways of doing things. We kind of pull them in and work on identifying specific processes that have not just an impact in one department, but kind of systemic impact. So things like looking for improvements in systems of time management and our technology procurement and things like that. We're trying to look at these bigger issues that affect all of them and their departments, so they can take it back, and hopefully through the experience of the innovation team, we try to teach them skills. I was a lucky student of the Denver Peak Academy, which actually is here today, when we look a lot at Lean and Six Sigma practices, and so through these innovation teams, we try to teach those skills so that hopefully they can in turn go back and identify opportunities within their own department. And then I also have an external capacity through the Mayor's Challenge Cabinet. So we're in our second year, and we appointed a civic board of young professionals to get them involved in looking at opportunities to identify things that affect them in their lives and how the city works for them. And we've done everything from adopting new ordinances to address some of the specific issues that they've been working on, but also bringing in new technology to communicate better with our community and things like that. So I think that's been really nice because it's kind of a crowdsourcing of solutions by bringing in people that we're hoping to address and retain and attract to our city.
I would love Karen, who just joined us, to introduce herself. Public transportation, we love it, and it screws up sometimes.
Bart is it's turning into New York here, is all I have to say. We were packed like sardines.
Could you tell us where you're joining us from and what you do there?
Yes, I am with the City Attorney's Office in Oakland, but I also was a Leading by Design Fellow at the California College of Arts, trying to bringing in design thinking principles into government. So we can talk about that. But I represent the city on a host of issues, including economic development, real estate, technology, and the like. And I get to feel a lot of the pain points inside government.
I was going to count off being kind of the unfunded innovation model. I happen to work in an office that reports to the mayor's office, but we're budget lines out of the Human Resources Administration in New York. So we're still a lean group, don't get me wrong. There could be a lot more people there to do all of the different things that we all do. But it's a little bit different in that we have a larger team. I work on the policy side. We have a full technology team. We were founded under the Bloomberg administration to be the technology and the data share for the 8 health and human services agencies that serve New Yorkers. In talking to some of the people here, they say, well, how many people do you serve? Well, we kind of have a small or medium-sized American city who live at poverty level in New York, and they really rely on the social services that our agencies provide. And it's also really important that to capture a lot of the crossover between those different populations. They kind of go to different agencies for different things, but it's good to know who's going where to do what. So right now, we're trying to hire more leaders, as I mentioned, who really understand design and development and can help open the process to working differently. Right now, it's very much an enterprise model, but there's partially a reason for that. This stuff serves hundreds of thousands of people. The product that I work the most on right now, which is called Access NYC, which is the benefits eligibility screener and also online application for some programs. We're on target to get 1 million visits this year, and we've processed hundreds of thousands of applications as well. So it's big traffic, but we're really eager to get started in working in more of a user-centric, citizen-centric approach and doing more prototyping and really getting out and testing with our users. So one of the first hires that I get to make is actually a designer to come work on the team with us, which is really great. So we are recruiting, so if you know designer folks, also the executive director role in my team is open right now, so if you know people who want to work in this space, you can come be my boss, which is also really great. But I think this idea of having more leaders who can facilitate is huge, and then helping bring that capacity across government. I also still, even though I've gone on the inside now, I'm still really working to build on the outside and hosting events, not only with Beta NYC as part of the Brigade program, but also really informal gatherings. This summer we started Civic Fridays in New York, where some of the organizers work inside government, some are on the outside as designers and technologists, and having not a learning session, not a hack night, not any of those kinds of things, but just a let's go meet up somewhere at a bar and drink whatever beverage of your choice, but have that social interaction as well, and so that you can talk about your work in a comfortable, friendly way. And some of those connections that come out of there are really useful, and I've found, especially as I've gone on the inside now in the government, is to really have these friends across all these agencies. And I didn't meet them sitting at a hack night, and I didn't meet them in a meeting for my job. I met them at this informal social gathering. We're also in New York hosting Civic Design Camp, which Code for America and the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Innovation hosted here in April. Very big success of mixing people inside and outside government, talking about what is the future of design. And how can we really apply it, and also sharing case studies from the work as well as skill shares. We're doing it again in New York in November, and as much as Code for America talks about reuse of apps, I would really love to see reuse of community organizing. You have to tweak it for your community, but there's some great ideas that are starting to bubble up in planning a second event. You guys had done so much of the legwork. Like you'd bought the domain, and you had a lot of the marketing materials written that we've just adapted it. We didn't have to invent it from scratch. And so we're really eager to host something similar with a unique New York spin on it.
Well, I can talk a little bit about some of the stuff happening in the federal government. I should caveat, which is say that I am not the spokesperson for the federal government. So this is sort of the quick and dirty of what's been going on in terms of building capacity. So there are a number of different initiatives happening at the federal level to sort of bring designer, developer, project manager, experienced leaders in. There's many of you know our former CTO, Todd Park, had sort of a really powerful saying, which is to say that if we sort of invest in just one solution, we're sort of waterfalling the problem. We're waterfalling the solution to the problem. So I think when you see, which might be sort of confusing from the outside, is lots of different things going on, is this very vast and diverse set of challenges trying to be addressed by sort of a number of different angles. So one of the first of those that arose was the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, which has just kicked off its 3rd year. And that program brings about 30 people who are sort of experts and leaders from the private sector from a range of disciplines to work directly within federal agencies. So they're in teams of 1 to 3, working sort of hand in hand with internal innovators, leaders, sort of folks trying to push the envelope to help build capacity to execute on really awesome new ideas. And a lot of the work there is sort of around proof of concept. So there's folks inside who they know their problems well, they own the issue, but they don't have the capacity or the specific skills to execute. And what is involved in getting contractors and folks like that in is very time consuming and labor intensive. So that's a really cool model for sort of experimenting and trying different things and help to show that there's all these different ways of doing stuff. And it's seen a lot of really awesome success, both in terms of specific products and services launched, also organizational change that's happened internally, and sort of new ideas being adopted across the board, from design thinking to agile development processes, for example. So that's one bucket of things. Another organization that you guys have probably been hearing about is 18F, which is, as we like to say, sort of the biggest PIF project. It was started by a number of my fellows last year who identified the need for continual capacity for these sorts of issues. And it's really, really awesome. They have somewhere between 50 and 60 people. They have a team in DC and in San Francisco. They're designers or developers, project managers, and they work sort of in a partnership relationship with agencies. So an agency says, I want to do this thing sort of from scratch, from the beginning. They come with a modern technology stack with awesome expertise, and they help build these really, really sort of 21st century digital services from the start. And now there's the newest of the triplets, I guess, which is the U.S. Digital Service. And we're still sort of getting our feet on the ground and figuring out where we fit in. But we're often thinking ourselves as kind of like a SWAT team, as fixers. So we're diving into really thorny, large-scale problems that can't necessarily be sort of scratched and started over, but helping agencies get back on track using all those same best practices that folks here are talking about. And the other thing that's really cool is that agencies themselves are modeling different versions of these teams, much sort of like you guys. Some have innovation groups, some are building their own digital services. And the thing that I find really exciting about all of this is that when we talk about capacity, we often think it's just about bringing somebody new from the outside. But what that fails to acknowledge is that there's an incredible amount of skill and capacity and knowledge already within the agencies. It's often just a matter of figuring out how to unlock that, support those people, provide them infrastructure, standards, tools, things like that. So I think these different groups are getting at that in different kinds of ways. So it's all incredibly new and super exciting. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have more awesome stuff to report back soon.
I can talk a little bit about San Francisco and how we're thinking about it here. So when Mayor Lee first came to office in 2012, one of the first things he did was create an innovation office. And he saw the leadership that Jay Nath, who's currently our Chief Innovation Officer, had in driving change throughout the city. And he appointed Jay as the first Chief Innovation Officer in the country. And as part of that, when Jay was creating the office, he said, I need two things. I need this office to be in the mayor's office, and I need to hire his deputy, Shannon Spadanke. And I think that just sending that signal that it is in the mayor's office, and it's important to bring kind of a team together to help implement the mayor's vision was really important. And just thinking about sort of the type of people that office kind of embodies. You know, Jay came from the private sector. Shannon was an entrepreneur and an artist. And Jay says that a lot of the reason he chose Shannon was because she is an artist, and she would bring like a new kind of thinking into government. And similar to other offices, that the office was a startup within government. You know, it was unfunded, but the idea was just to be entrepreneurial and see how the office could make a big impact. And so part of that is thinking creatively around how to bring in new people. So one of the programs that has been really successful is our number of fellowship programs. So we, in 2013, we're a Code for America fellowship partner, where we had a great team working with our human services agency. And I love telling the story of that partnership because they came in, they were in San Francisco for a year. They built an amazing tool for that agency, and one of those team members is now sitting in HSA building out an innovation methodology for that department. So not only did they bring in a technology tool, but now Mark Hebert, the fellow, is really kind of institutionalizing change within that department and across the city. Another innovation fellowship program modeled after the Presidential Innovation Fellowship program was the Mayor's Innovation Fellowship, and that's how I came into the city. So I also started exactly 19 months ago. And that was really to give people a chance who were in their mid-career, would never consider working for government, and I could never have imagined actually enjoying working for the government. But it was a great way for the city to open up an opportunity for new kinds of people. And so I think having those kind of lowering the barriers to entry for really new kinds of people and new kinds of thinking into government is really important. And just one other kind of method that we're using is around thinking creatively around partnerships. One of the programs that we do is called Living Innovation Zones. It's essentially a program that looks to innovate the permits in the public space. The first one that we did was just, I don't know which direction it is, but it's on Market Street between 3rd and 4th. And that's a partnership where we're really trying to take advantage of all the design and innovation talent that's in the city. We have innovators, artists, creative people throughout the city, but you don't really see that in our public spaces. So we're designing a program to sort of leverage that talent in the public right away. And that for us, we don't fund these projects, but they're creative installations in the public space that we find partners who have a vested interest in having a public installation. So I would encourage all of you to go, if you need a breath of fresh air, to go to Market Street and visit that project and see the kind of innovation that San Francisco is bringing in with, basically very low costs to the city, but that is really transforming our city.
So I come to this work really kind of out of a necessity. I started with the city of Oakland around the time the foreclosure crisis had hit. And what started off as a couple of furlough days a year quickly grew to 20 days a year, the equivalent of one working month. Yet citizen service requests went up by almost 30%, right? This was a time of need. So people were trying to do more with less. And we looked at the way we were doing business and said, something's got to give. We got to do something differently. So I think there was a group of us inside City Hall, not organized in any fashion. We found each other somehow, who were interested in wanting to look at ways we could do business differently. So we piloted there's two things I'll talk about. One was we piloted design charrettes last year, bringing together different public agencies. Because one thing we have in our bureaucracy is a lot of disconnects, right? We have siloed government agencies. You might have, for a procurement process, you would have like budget, contract compliance, city attorney, everybody's in different offices, not really connecting on what the big picture was of what we were trying to accomplish. So through these design charrettes, we were trying to bring together these different agencies to talk about a specific process. And where we started was actually with special event permits. It seemed like low-hanging fruit. It wasn't controversial. And it touched about 5 different agencies. And what we learned through that process, through actually asking city staff to draw the problem. I know that sounds really basic, but a lot of times we're in government and we're in the conference room and everybody's talking around a table, and we think we understand what we're saying. But we're doing it through our own lens. And so actually getting up on a whiteboard and actually having people draw it out, we could quickly realize that 5 different agencies had 5 different perspectives on the same problem. So that was really eye-opening. The second part was when we went out to do our user research. We interviewed folks who had applied for special event permits on the citizen side, as well as folks who handled it internally. And we realized that the pain points for for city staff mirrored those of citizens. And we thought that was a huge point of building empathy, and a great start-off point for where we could kind of tackle some of the problems that we saw. So those were the design charrettes. They were pilots. We're trying to build out a bigger resource within City Hall to make this more of an ongoing thing for all of our projects. And the second thing that we did was we started thinking about partnerships in different ways. I think, there's this great Winston Churchill quote, you're out of money, now it's time to think. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we felt like. So we partnered, we're the first city to partner with Kiva Zip to crowdfund local economic development. The governor had just abolished redevelopment agencies. We had relied on these funds to support local entrepreneurs in the community. Those funds were no longer available to us. And we said, well, why don't we use our gravitas as a city, become a trustee on this platform. It's an online microfinance platform where we get to endorse businesses at no cost, no liability or financial risk to the city. And we get to tell the community that the city of Oakland endorses this business, and the community gets to crowdfund $5 to $25 of their own capital for these 0% interest loans. And the program has proved a huge success. We're actually about to roll out, the initial pilot was 3 companies, and we're now rolling out 10 more, and that was within less than a year. So it's been a good way to think about doing business differently.
I think you actually opened a great intro to our next question, which is about building consensus around this work, not only on your own team, but across agencies and definitely across the hierarchies that we know exist in all of our governments. Drawing it out is amazing. You get to visualize how people are seeing it differently from each other. Any of you have other stories about, I call this talking about the hard stuff in a nice way, but this work isn't easy, and that you have to bring a lot of people into the fold, and sometimes it takes a lot more process than one would have ever imagined to get a group of people on board with an idea.
I think the first step has always been trying to build trust with people. I think you need to have an honest conversation, and therefore you need to really know who you're talking to, what perspective they're coming from, and spending a great deal of time listening in the upfront actually has incredible benefits in the long run. Mm-hmm. So I think when I first arrived, I spent several months just listening to people and created a space where I'd often I sit on the 25th floor of a 29-story building. It's an old concrete mass that was built in the time of a great political machine in Kansas City, Missouri. And it's very unapproachable for people. There's not a lot of collaborative space and things like that. So I left my door open on my office floor to create a space where a lot of people just happened across it because I was the only open door. So people would fall into I literally show up and be like, well, where am I? I'm trying to find somebody else, but you're here. And so, and I built a lot of trust with people who weren't the initial kind of list of people I was supposed to go out and meet. So I met all the directors and the deputy directors and division managers, so kind of the higher parts of the organization. But it was the people that are actually doing the work that I started to establish a relationship by getting out of my office and being where they were, as well as opening up my doors. So that's where you get the real insight as to how things are going. That's where you identify a lot of those pinch points because you're working with the people that are doing the work. And I think so establishing that trust early on was really important. And I think what's happened as a result of that is now I have a very large network of people throughout the organization that are essentially eyes and ears in helping us identify opportunities for improvement that I wouldn't have had if I had just sat around in the meetings that I was told to go to at the beginning and kept my door closed.
Yeah, I can build on that a little bit. One of the things when I think about this is I can't think of like a single time where everyone was like, thumbs up. Like it's not, consensus doesn't feel like everyone voting yes necessarily. One thing that I've found is that there's kind of this, we feel like a movement, right? We feel like all these people who are coming together to change government, but there's all the people that already work in government, right?
There are a lot more of them.
There's a lot more of them, especially in the federal government. And I think we can create this kind of like this and us and them effect. And what happens is that you're met with a lot of skepticism. When I first started at the VA last year, And we were warned of this. There's, especially in the federal government, there's this like, okay, well, we'll just wait you out kind of thing. You know, I'll smile at you, I'll shake your hand, I'll listen to you talk about design, but you're going to be gone in a year. And really, that building trust felt like not just proving to them that you're worthwhile and that you can help them or sort of advance their issues, but that you're as committed as they are, and that you're not here for the glory, and you're not here for the sort of sexy movement thing. The other thing, which I think is somewhat related to that, is that at least in the federal government, I believe this should be true in the local government, there are a lot of meetings. And there are a lot of people at those meetings, like very common to have 30 plus people in a meeting, which is still mind-blowing to me. And those are supposed to be the meetings where like decisions are made, right? Except actually all the decisions are made before the meetings. There's like pre-meetings and pre-meetings to the pre-meetings. And so while I actually did come to find value in creating spaces where different kinds of people come together and work together to get to some conclusion, most of consensus building, and as much as I feel like I can call it that, was about building those individual relationships, proving that we're like here because we care and we're fighting for the same thing as they are, and having people sign off sort of in a one-on-one kind of way, and have them give their support in a way that they're invested, instead of like getting everybody in a room who doesn't know each other, spending half the meeting doing introductions, like getting the video thing to work, which it never does, and then sort of getting thumbs up afterwards. But it doesn't, frankly, it's an interesting question because I don't think it feels like consensus. I feel like it's nudging the needle forward more over time.
We're going to actually open it up to questions. Let's just get through the answer if anyone else wants to answer the question, and then I really want to open this up to be more of a conversation. It's a lot of people in here, but more of a conversation where you guys can ask questions and also share any stories on how you're doing this work in your own government as well. Did anyone
I just wanted to
question?
Yeah, just building on, I mean, I totally agree with everything that's been said, and I just wanted to add that one thing that we've found effective is just demonstrating that something can be done. So there's a lot of skepticism in government that change can happen. So just by building something that looks really nice that people can actually use can be really powerful as a way to enter into, something like spinning up a WordPress site that you can build in a day and showing that to someone can be really impactful, just to share, to get buy-in and show that things can move.
And I would add to that that I think from a sustainability perspective, in terms of building consensus, it's important to show and then also to get the buy-in, right, from the folks who can actually make things happen. And I say that with, in Oakland, we're a strong mayor form of government. The city administrator is really like the COO of our organization, and getting her buy-in in what we were trying to do was really critical for the success of our process. And I think being able to show her and bring her along also helped to nudge her as well. And I think that was really important.
Great. Well, thank you all for being subjected to my questions. I'd love to open it up. If you could just raise your hand if you want to ask a question or share a story, and we'll bring the mic to you. This is being recorded too, so you will be on recording. Oh, let's start. We'll go back there and then up here.
Hi, Kansas City. Go Kansas City Royals. So my question is, Mikey yesterday talked a little bit about technology being in the strategic sort of seat at the table. I'm just curious, with all of this sort of innovation titles that run across the panel, how you really leverage and identify technology resources, because they seem so interrelated with innovation and technology sort of serving that. So I would love to hear your experience with technology and how you leverage those resources and how you identify sort of the leadership that's pushing for that kind of technology advancement.
So I can start by answering this. I actually work in a technology delivery shop, so to speak, but I work on the policy team. So we have a technical staff. We have developers who are part of our team. But then I have a business analyst and a project manager and some other kind of policy-centric people. I'm actually a designer by training that have come into this space really from the human-centric side of it. And we're there to help translate the policy around delivering social services to people who are actually building the technology. I'm very new in this particular group, but had a pretty interesting conversation with our larger IT agency a couple weeks ago about creating an account to do the screening and applications. We call it create account for a reason. You are not applying yet. You are not registering for benefits. And the tech team came back and said, no, it has to say register. We're not going to change it. We've already built it. We're going to leave it saying register. And we went back and said, well, in this space, from a policy perspective, if you say register, it means a very specific thing. And we cannot promise people that they are registering for anything if they're just getting the account started. It took some back and forth, and it took some consensus building all the way up. It went to commission level. But they came back and said, no, we'll change it for you. We understand, based on really being the kind of explaining and back and forth around why this matters to our constituency who will be using this tool as well. So I think it's balancing constantly the policy side with the tech, and really thinking technology as a tool, not as the end of all means.
And I might add, I'm definitely not a technologist at all. I mean, I've used technology as an architect. It's becoming more and more important. But I think we've kind of found a couple different ways. First of all, we're saddled with a lot of things that we have to live with. So we do apply a lot of lean methodology to look at living with the technology that we have that's actually addressing broken processes. So it's not being leveraged to its fullest capacity. So how can we improve the structure, the ordinances that create those processes, and then how do we also shift even the culture around that work to help make the technology work better for those processes, which has actually been a really interesting thing because, for instance, we have an incredible amount of debt on one system that actually hits every single department, and we can't get rid of it until we pay down that debt. So we are living with it, whether we like it or not, for the next 10 years. And that's a pretty considerable investment that we've made as an organization. So we found a couple other ways of kind of restructuring how we approach technology when it comes to innovation. And one is an innovation partnership program, which allows startups and people with great ideas but no place to test them, and a way into City Hall to work with us to try those new technologies with us with zero money, but giving them an opportunity to really do proof of concept, which can be extremely valuable for them to then go get other clients. And obviously there's quite a market out there. We also are working on a technology roadmap, which is really looking at a bigger strategy as an organization, taking a step back and thinking about what the implications of technology are in how we work, our workforce development. You have to train people. We have digital literacy issues within our own workforce. So you can't just come in with a super app and a cool piece of hardware and expect that to solve problems when you don't have people that are functionally literate. You need to think about how that's designed, how they're going to interact with it, and then what value that technology could effectively bring for the organization. So there's a whole internal kind of discussion going on about what that looks like, and then also how does that reflect outside? How do we use technology to better engage our community? So I think that's kind of our approach has been working with what we've got, but also taking a bigger step back and saying, okay, where do we want to go from here? Because currently our procurement is very knee-jerk, and we respond to a request from a department, and that's how it's done, instead of thinking about, well, what can we do to leverage open data? What can we do to make sure that we're talking across multiple departments? Where can we really be much more effective in this? And that takes a larger strategy.
So three quick things for your question. The first is that even though Mikey has the ear of senior leadership in the White House, that does not mean that we have a green light to use whatever technology we want at the agency level. As wonderful as that would be, oftentimes the people at the top of things are super on board. It's the actual obstacle is in the middle. The people who really own this stuff on a day-to-day basis, and they're the people who've been running the systems and living with these tools for the last 10, 15, 20 years or longer. And so the second point is that a lot of what we have to do is actually prove that it's about a different technology stack, and it's often a very cost-saving one. And often that comes by the building consensus stuff, showing what works, that sort of thing. The third point I want to make is that, and this is I'm not at all the first person to say this, but I think I would encourage our space to be very careful about how much we love technology. I obviously can harness and do an incredible number of things, but as government services, first and foremost, it's on us to make sure we're delivering the solutions that address people's needs. And I think it's very easy, particularly when we sort of lean on all the cool stuff happening in the private sector around technology, for us to be like, I'll just make a cool app, or we'll bring these designers and developers in, and they'll bring us some shiny stuff. But it's really, I think it actually does a detriment to our mission long term if we let that stuff sort of take the spotlight instead of investing the time to make sure we're, if we do pursue a technology solution, that it's one that really is responding to the gap, right? Which isn't to say that we obviously shouldn't go down that path, but I often see people say, okay, well, the innovation fellows see this a lot. Their agency partners say, okay, well, we want you to build this, or can you stand up that? And they'll stop and say, okay, first we need to figure out what the problem is before we know what the solution is.
Someone asked you a question up front.
Yeah, my name is Ted Lair. I'm with the City of Austin. I'm a data architect. A lot of what say something short, and then I'll ask a question. A lot of what you said really resonates with me. The consensus building, the idea that there's a lot of meetings and that kind of thing. And my role in the city is new. I've only been there 6 months. But what I'm finding this is the statement part. What I'm finding is that going with the people who do the work is a way to get management buy-in, the upper management buy-in. You get them excited, they will latch on to the ideals of something, and they work. And it seems to be working to build it up. But also the consensus building, at some point I'm finding, even if you get the cynics, someone needs to lead the outcome of the consensus. And I'm finding that, okay, yeah, we like this, and then I find I'll have to make a statement about the way things are going to be or the way things are, and that's not really the truth, right? Sort of you're the vision person, right? Someone has to be the vision in that consensus. And the problems I'm dealing with is that Austin is a very federated government. It has a weak mayor, a lot of independence in energy and water, and to get consensus among very independent agencies with their own budgets, their own press, there's a number of issues, is hard. Maybe because I'm new at this, but I'd be interested in what you do to try to build consensus and decision-making authority. Who decides when you need to have transportation, police, EMS, and fire all work together to solve or improve South by Southwest, right? How do you get that done? So.
I think a lot of it is around thinking about who are the necessary people to be on the team, and who are the people that you want to loop in and make sure they know what's going on, but they don't necessarily need to be part of the decision-making process. I think it's really easy in government for everyone to feel ownership over an area that kind of crosses a lot of different departments. So I think forming teams of people that at least represent a number of different stakeholder issues around government that can move forward, but that can also make sure that as you're moving forward, you're kind of bringing in and informing or getting buy-in from the right people, and making sure that you know who are the people that are absolutely necessary. So that you can build things.
Do you want to do one last quick question? It's our last few minutes. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Matthew McNaughton from Jamaica. One point and one question. The point is really that super impressed by the fact it's an all-female panel. Would love to have more of that in Jamaica as well. The second question is, I get a bit more into kind of the dirty of the work that we do. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but how do you guys control for Vanity Metrics, which is this idea that, all right, well, there are this many. It's very easy to talk about the shiny things, but when you talk about like what are the things that the things that we're actually trying to get done and controlling for how the shiny stuff helps to build momentum. but that may not necessarily last very long when someone starts to actually scratch under the surface. And so I guess I'm curious, in your work in the different organizations where it's between starting up new teams or being in institutions that have been a little longer, how have you managed that tension?
I think actually this might address both of the two questions that have just come up, because I think it's also making sure that you're addressing the right problem and you're asking the why about the right thing. Because I think we often we can understand what this problem is, but then when you really look into it, it actually comes from a lot of different places. It's just like inverting the model and looking at the customer. A lot of times we don't do that when we design a process. And I think that's changing, and I think there's an increasing need to do so, because we have to do it with, everything has to work really, really effectively. There's just no room for some of the garbage that's been around. And I think, and sorry, I don't mean to be so frank, but there's definitely, there's a lot of that. And I think I don't have any money to do anything shiny. That helps, but I also, I get to approach my city government with a question of why a lot of times. So we hear the answer is that shiny thing. If I just had this, if I just had that, this would solve everything. But it doesn't. And when you start to ask more and more questions and probe into it and find who the real client is, the real customer for the problem, then you start to readdress what the issue is and start to reframe it. And I think that's been a critical thing, is that I've been told what all these problems are across City Hall, all these big issues and the silos and everything else and the way we're funded, and we have such a limited amount of resources. But when you actually take a step back and realize, well, wait a minute, that's what it looks like on the surface, but there's so much more, and finding those small wins where you can build consensus around a small win and show that it's not something big, it's not something really expensive that's going to solve this problem. People start to get on board and then really want to delve into that issue wholeheartedly.
Small wins add up. Yeah. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I would love to talk with all of you and learn how you're doing this work in your own governments. We need to be more connected and have a stronger network of people doing this work. So please come talk to us. I know all of these ladies would love to talk to you guys too. So thank you so much for your attention today.